So can you please tell me a little bit about yourself, your name, where you live and work?
My name is Louis Alloro, and I live in New York, New York, and I'm working right now in Cleveland, Ohio.
Right. And what do you do?
I consider myself a change agent. I work in organizational development and in systems development, and that involves a whole lot of coaching of different people within those systems.
Right, right. And what's your background for doing that?
MAP degree, and prior to that a master in the foundations of education, so I kind of look at the intersections of how people learn and how positive psychology can help that learning.
And you have some training and coaching or teaching or?
Well, teaching.
Teaching?
Yeah,
right.
no formal. That's not true. I went through David Rock's results coaching program.
Right. And so for how long would you say that you've been working in applying positive psychology?
4 years.
4 years. And can you tell me a little bit more about your job?
My job is to help places evolve to new levels, and I do that by helping people learn how to think about how they think, and then how to think differently usually.
Right. So what could be an example of some of the things that you do?
I run, in this citywide intervention in Cleveland, Ohio, I run learning labs, facilitate learning laboratories in businesses, schools, community groups, people's living rooms, public parks, bars, wineries, anywhere that a group of people comes together and gets a little snippet of positive psychology in an experience, a shared group experience that leaves them feeling energized, engaged, and alive.
So primarily groups?
Primarily groups right now, although, I do work with individuals, and at one time in the past 4 years, I was doing more individual work, and now I'm doing more systems group stuff.
Right. And what issues is it that they want you to help them with?
Well, what we're doing in Cleveland is we are taking a place that is pregnant with possibility and lacking a bit of energy, and we're infusing different parts of the system with positivity, essentially, by leveraging social and emotional leaders within the whole system, people who share the vision that it could be better there, and we're teaching those people applied positive psychology, coaching them through that, facilitating that learning so that they become the change agents within their networks at home, at school, at work, on streets.
And what does the training look like? Like if I was part of it, if I was one of the participants, what would happen?
It's a co-created learning experience. So as facilitators, we come with a bit of content, and really it's in the shared experience of that content that the consciousness gets raised and the transformation gets.
So what happens the first half hour and the next half hour, like?
It's not that prescriptive. There are elements of our learning labs that are emerging as staples. One of them is an opportunity to go around and everyone shares a recent win in their life, priming people for positivity around what's good. Another staple ingredient has become making the bridge between how thinking positively releases certain neurotransmitters. So with we're popularizing really the neuroscience behind it to give people an understanding of what happens in their bodies when they perceive a potential opportunity versus perceiving a potential threat, and how that goes back to what they're thinking, and how it's that thinking that influences the feeling, and the feeling is what drives the behavior. So if the behavior is to fight or flight, it's, how does cortisol contribute to that? Or if the behavior is moving towards moving towards a goal, moving towards what we want more of, then those neurotransmitters also come from the thinking pattern that's behind it.
Yeah. And when you used to do individual coaching, what would that look like?
My individual coaching was very conversational and very personal, different for every person, but one where we just kind of got at the essence of who they are, what they value, what their thinking is like. It ended up being quite spiritual, actually, in a way that, you know, I think one day, a year and a half ago or so, I was like, wow, I'm helping people become more spiritual. And I didn't go into it with that intention, but that's how it was manifesting, really.
So you said conversational. Can you say some more about that?
Yeah, like, again, it all started, you know, the conversations start with, you know, tell me what's going good these days, and that kind of leads us down roads to discuss, you know, what they're working on, what some of the challenges are. It was very dependent on the individual. I don't have a coaching outline. I was never that type of coach.
Mm-hmm. So did you follow principles, or what did you do? How did you know what to do?
I followed my intuition.
And what did it tell you?
It told me to be curious. I used to worry about asking the right question, and when I was able to let go of that and realize that whatever I was curious about became a good question, and not that there was one right question, it just opened up a whole new level of coaching for me.
Yeah. Right. And did you do anything every time in every coaching engagement? Any patterns that you kept on doing, or that would make them look a little similar? Some of the coaching engagements.
Starting with the sharing of what's good, ending with setting some intentions for going forth, and some accountability around those intentions. But, you know, aside from those bookends, what happened in between was left up to the universe.
Right. And how did you hold people accountable?
After I encourage people when they leave to send me an email saying how they're going to intend to think differently, like what kind of insights came from our session that they were going to focus on their thinking differently around, and then what kind of accountability they'd like around doing. So what they were going to commit to between sessions, and I felt that was a good way to track progress. And I found that the people who took that on consistently were the ones that made the best progress.
Right. And so what did you do in the next session? When they came back, did you ask about it, or what?
Yeah.
So like how? What could be?
Those emails were just a nice way to track things, so that when they came back the next time, and after we shared wins and got into, you know, what it is that they were working on, was able to say, okay, you said you were going to do this, this, and this. Did that happen?
And then from there on, it would be flexible.
Totally flexible.
Right. Okay. And do you use assessments? Like, did you use assessments back then, or do you use assessments right now?
Yeah, for sure. You know, the authentic happiness assessments.
And
mainly.
And what do you tell people? Do you ask them to take them at home, or when you're there, or?
At home usually. On one of our first sessions, I'll ask them to go on and find what they're curious about to measure, without me prescribing what it is that they need to measure, and leave it up to, and it's interesting, you know, who comes back doing what kind of assessments, but then I'll ask them to take the VIA for sure, and I'll ask them to, I used to have them measure their optimism and that kind of stuff more than I had been doing recently.
Right. And why do you ask them to take the VIA?
Just to put a language around their strength.
And
to encourage them to think about them at their best.
And how do you use it when they come back with the VIA results?
In conversation about, you know, them at their best and what that looks like, and what kind of you know, what kind of combinations of strengths do we hear in their stories or in their wins.
And is this in groups also?
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of how you've done that?
In groups, you know, with families, I've done family trees of strengths. Within business contexts, I do a plotting of strengths on an Excel spreadsheet to show, you know, everyone in the system and then what their top 5 strengths are, color coded to see where the alignment is.
What do you mean with alignment?
Alignment, for example, I just recently did an engagement with a firm where the top 2 the principals of the firm had equity, fairness, and justice as their top strength, which I thought was very interesting that they would engage someone like me to come in and help facilitate the evolution in a way that included all the voices, because that's what I do. Is I listen to all the pieces and try to connect the pieces, and so I thought that was interesting that they would be down with that.
And how did you get the idea to do it in an Excel spreadsheet or the tree?
The tree came, I think, from the Positive Psychology in High School handbook that Karen and Marty and Jane Gillum published. Or I don't know that it's published even. But it was an intervention that they used in schools. And the Excel spreadsheet, I think maybe one of my mat mates did that for something. You know, it's hard to remember where the collection of tools come from. They're just there.
Right. And have you made your own tools, your own assessments?
I'm sure I have. I mean, it's hard to, like I said, it's hard to really know like what comes from where these days. It's just there.
Right. And so how do you use the different things? Do you follow any principles? Do you use them at specific times or for specific reasons, or?
Just when my intuition guides me that it's time.
Right. So what happens? Is that before a meeting with a client or a group? Do you listen to intuition, or is it during the engagement, or?
No, I mean, I think it's a little bit more premeditated than but usually, you know, those strengths assessments come in at the beginning so that we could use that language throughout the engagement. Or in a group setting, recently I did some stuff with teachers, and they took several assessments before they even got to the group.
Right.
You know, so they came in with some of those results.
Yeah, and the conversation around the results. Can you tell me about?
Well, I share a little bit of what, you know, how the assessments were designed and built to give people an understanding of the research piece of it, but a snippet of it. I don't drown people in that. You know, I like to make it palatable and something that's accessible. And the conversation, usually with the strengths, starts with a story of them at their best, and then, you know, segueing that into a conversation of what the strengths were as they were measured, you know, and how we heard those strengths reflected in those stories, gives people usually a nice insight around, okay, that's what a strength is. It's when I feel good. It's when things are happening.
So everybody in the group tells the whole group a story, or do you put them in subgroups, or? It
depends on the variables of each environment. You know, it's really hard to say I do something one way, but because it's always, you know, if the group is small enough to have everyone share stories, great. If not, then we'll have to find a different way to do that.
Right. And what about positive interventions? Do you use certain interventions?
Do I use positive interventions?
Yeah, or other interventions?
Yeah, for sure.
Which ones, or?
All of them. You know, I mean, the ones that have been, you know, that are evidence-based are few, but there's 5 or 6 of them, and I use all of those. And then I design my own. Like the other day I did a learning lab at Case Western Reserve University, and a simple positive intervention I like to do is, you know, somewhere during the lab to have everyone get up and take a new seat, you know, and to show how, you know, how that is a good opportunity, you know, and to talk through a little bit about why it's a good opportunity to take a new seat, and, you know, what that allows for, and how that small thing could have a big impact.
Yeah. And other interventions that you've created yourself?
Well, I don't know. I don't even know that I would want to say that I created anything myself. You know, I personally, I don't really believe in intellectual property, you know, because who knows where ideas come from. But I've been influenced by lots of people. And we had a lab in a public park recently, and we had everyone take their shoes off and run their feet through the grass for a moment of, you know, savoring that feeling. And even there was a 6 or 7-year-old girl that was there, and she described it as tickly.
Yeah.
You know, that was the feeling that she got. And, you know, just using it to build emotional intelligence and cognitive fitness.
That specific exercise or all exercises?
I think all interventions fall into that category for me.
Right. Can you say something more about it?
Yeah, that there's pieces that help people tap into their thinking, the cognitive piece, but then there's also a piece that helps people tap into their feeling, the affective piece that I think makes for a good intervention.
Right. And you mentioned that you share a little bit of knowledge about, for instance, the assessment. Can you say something more about how you share your knowledge?
In small bite-sized pieces that give people some access to it without, you know what I mean? Because even for me at this conference, seeing all those charts and graphs, I'm like,
yeah.
It's just hard, you know? And sometimes I feel that science itself is an elitist language that few people have access to,
yeah.
You know? So it's never in a chart, or it's very rarely in a chart or a graph. It's sometimes in a story, sometimes in a, you know, a few bullet points, but never in a way that will send someone into a threat mode around it. Because it does for me, and so maybe that's why I'm very cautious.
Right. And so can you do use PowerPoint?
I do. You know what I've been using lately? I don't know if you know Prezi. Have you seen that?
I'm not sure, no.
It's a new online software that helps you build a storyboard as opposed to a linear
Right.
slideshow. It's cool.
So how does it show? Like, can you see the whole story and zoom in on something, or what?
You build it, and then you can you plot out the order of your idea, and you could do it like, you know, half hour before, you know, knowing that your ideas change and how you want to do something, and then you have it just flips through and zooms in on what you want when, you know, in the order that you design.
Right.
It's great.
And how do they perceive it?
I think it's an example of a positive intervention too. Honestly, it's different. It's not, you know, it's not the same old PowerPoint.
Mm-mm. And the things that you write, how do you pick the things out? Like, how do you know what to write?
On the slides?
Yeah.
My intuition.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, it's that's a hard question. How do I know what to write?
How do you know what they want
write?
information about? Like, do you follow any principles when you pick out the information, or is there something important to tell them, or?
I think the real value for me as a coach and as a facilitator of learning is that, or something that a belief that I like to carry. I have to remind myself of it sometimes, but the belief is that I don't have the answers, just some of the questions, and that the learning happens in the space and the people that come and their experiences, and I really do believe that. And that's a constructivist idea. John Dewey was a big constructivist, and during my MAP degree, I got into social construction theory a bit, and you know, I really believe that it's in relationship that the learning happens. So we could have slides and we could have content, but that's not what it's about. It's about helping people build the capacity to connect with each other, and that's why I'm so big on social and emotional intelligences, helping people build the capacity to connect with themselves first, then with other people, and how that leads people to collaborate, to innovate, and to do things differently.
And how can you facilitate that?
By being me, I think, by bringing my strengths, you know, social intelligence and humor and love is my top strength. So I think that, you know, just showing up transparently and showing up all of me and helping people realize that I'm working on this stuff too, you know, that it's a process, and I like to think of it as the mind gym, these learning labs that we're running, and that you don't just come to the gym once and expect to be in tip-top shape. It's all about endurance, and it's about coming back and getting some physical training.
Right. And so your prior education in learning, what are you still using from it? Like when you create a workshop or coaching or.
What's the question? What am I using?
Yeah. So do you follow certain principles when you facilitate?
I think, as I just said, the social constructivist principles, the principle of being transparent and being open to learning. I think the best teachers are always open to learning themselves. So I think part of a principle that's very important to me is in my own development, you know, and being aware of my own development and being curious about my own development and realizing that it's never done, right? And being sure that the people that I work with, and that's actually what I look for when I engage with a coaching client, or even people that I'm bringing onto this team for the SOMO intervention in Cleveland, are these people out for their own growth? Because if they're not out for their own growth, then it's not going to help the sustainability of the engagement or of the collaboration. So even with a coaching client, I look for, are they willing to do the work, and are actually not in that order. Are they open to growth, and are they willing to do the work?
Right. And if not, what happens?
If not, I say, these are the things that I'm looking for, and I'm not so sure that I'm picking that up from you. And it's usually it's usually a moment where it's clear that that's the case. You know, it's not. It's never seemed to come from left field, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do to develop yourself?
I have a coach. I come to events like these. I read. I am curious. I'm working on it.
And when you learn something new, how do you integrate it? Like, how do you start applying it?
It's practice, awareness, mindfulness. Just having it situated in this prefrontal cortex and focusing my limited amount of attention, and making sure that I'm clear to be able to do that work.
You have been talking a little bit about I'm going to ask you anyway. So it's about flexibility, because one of the principles in evidence-based coaching is to adapt, and it sounds like you do it a lot. So have you any thoughts on that?
I think that's what it's all about. It's not the strongest of the species that survives, but the one's most adaptable, as Charles Darwin reminded us.
Yeah.
And that's become a staple in the learning labs too, is that very idea of being adaptable and being able to maybe unlearn certain things so you could relearn other things. And that's why I love David Rock's stuff about developing new neural connections, ones that become more of our default mode, so that we do end up being able to perceive things differently.
Right. And so how do you do it? Like when you change something, is it based on
for myself?
Yeah.
I mean, I love change. As a little boy, I used to move my bedroom furniture around every week. There's something I've always been loving of change. I mean, I've had 5 apartments in the past 4 years.
Right.
Like, yeah, that's a little exaggerated, but I love to exercise. It's one of my top Gallup strengths is adaptability, and I love to exercise it.
And so do you eat your own medicine, like the things that how you work with others? Is that also how you work with yourself, or?
For sure.
Can you say some more about that?
Well, you know, I love to go to, you know, I might find a restaurant that I like a lot, but I like to encourage myself to try something new, even if it's right next door to the one that I like a lot. Because what if I like something better? Now there's a shadow side to that too, just like anything, which is, I guess, what the paradox of choice is all about, and being a maximizer. But that's where I think that awareness that I have around that, being a good potential shadow, helps me not just act by impulse, but to act from a place of integrity and from a place of, you know, in this moment, what's going to be the best thing for me. And if it's the comfort of the restaurant that I know and love, then I'm going to go to the one that I know and love. And if it's the potential opportunity to find something better, then I'll make that choice, realizing that those choices come so often in any given day, 20,000 times really, and is how moments are measured. And if it's below my level of consciousness and I'm just acting by default, I'm really not being an intentional creator of my experience, which I guess brings me to another principle or philosophy, which is, I believe in creationism, and I believe that I am the an active ingredient in that in my life, and not a passive recipient.
Right. And eating your own medicine, have you made your own tree? Have you made like the interventions that you use for
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, if I haven't found value in it personally, then I would never offer it to someone else. Right. Yeah.
So everything you've tried that before you deliver it to someone else. Right. What about the expectations that other people meet you with? Like how what do you do to establish credibility as a coach or for positive psychology or?
I mean, I live it. I walk the talk, and I think it's really important that we do that as MAP grads and as also practitioners. And like, to me, there's nothing more frustrating than to see someone. I'll give you an example of Robert Emmons came to speak to our class, and I asked him if he had done if he does the gratitude journal, or I forget what I asked him, and he said no. And I was so upset. It just activated this really strong response in me of distrust.
Yeah. So and other things you do to establish credibility?
I mean, I write a blog. I give a lot of talks. I do a lot of... I'll speak to anyone that wants to listen, really. But I mean, I love the opportunity to meet lots of people, and I love the opportunity because that really is tapping into some of my strengths. So that's where I think it's that transparency of me being at my best and being intentional about doing things in my life that put me in more situations where I'm at my best, that encourage and inspire other people to do the same.
Right.
And not that it looks the same way, but that it's available to everybody.
Yeah. And what do you do to create or maintain a good relationship with the people that you coach?
I mean, I love them. I give them my cell phone number. I tell them they can call me anytime. They could text me. They could, you know. I mean, there's some other coaches I know that are like, you do that? And I do it because I think it creates a level of trust, you know, where we become friends. And I think that's important.
And other things you do to establish good relationships or maintain them?
You mean when I don't fuck them up?
You do?
Who doesn't? I mean, yeah, I mean, it's not always... I know it sounds trite and I've already said it, but I'm me. I'm not trying to be something other than who I am, and I underscore it again because I think there were times in my life where I did try to do that, and I was going upstream, and I didn't realize that during the time, but in the process of learning and applying positive psychology to my own life, I realized that it's so much better to go downstream and to just be and to be okay with. And I didn't, like, even during MAP, I wasn't in that same headspace. And one way I know that it shows up in my life is, like, I used to go to these sessions downstairs and I, would write everything down and, like, did I get it? And I would be with the people with the cameras and, like, and now I'm just able to go and trust that what I'm meant to hear, I'll hear, you know?
Yeah.
And make that my belief, as opposed to worrying that I'm going to miss something.
Yeah. So what do you do to help your clients stay engaged in the process of working towards their goals? Like if you're not there.
I don't know that I'm great at that, to be honest. What can I do? I mean, I don't have an answer to that question.
Follow up, send emails, like let them call you.
Yeah, I do. I mean, I write emails and I will follow up. If they text or call, of course I'll call them back. But that's where, I would do that for anybody. Not just because they're my clients, but I give positive feedback. I give an opportunity for them to express frustration. Like a lot of people will say to me, "Are you all positive all the time?" And I'm like, "No, hell's no," and maybe sometimes letting them see that helps that along too.
Yeah.
Realizing it's okay to to be human.
Yeah. And what do your clients tell you? What's their feedback?
I get some positive feedback. Like I'm just thinking of someone who recently was telling me that his dreams were coming true, and when I first started getting coached myself, I remember that moment when I said to my coach, who's still my coach, Deb Giffen. Have you spoken to her?
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend. She's a MAP grad. Deb Giffen. She's the director of executive education at Wharton Business School. And she is an amazing woman. We're saying, "Deb, my dreams are coming true." And she said, "I know. That's how this works." And I was like, "Really?" And it was at that moment where I thought, this is what I do in the world, I never thought I would be a coach. I would never, and when I had that insight, it made sense to me, like all of my previous experience of being a teacher and of, the types of relationships I had with my friends, or, it just all kind of made sense of course that's who I am. But it still for me came with certain beliefs, especially when you put the word life in front of that, that brought up negative associations about coaching, that I still, even to this day, have to fight a little bit.
Like what? Like
when someone says you're a life coach, I'm like, no, who am I to be coaching someone's life? Do I do life coaching? Yeah. Do I go there first? No, not really.
And how can you tell that your clients are progressing?
By the look in their eye, by the feeling I get being with them.
Do you ask them? Do you make assessments of it, or?
Yeah, I ask them.
Like what? What do you
How's
ask?
this working for you? You know, in our conversation, I'll ask, you know, is this working for you? Is this? I'm becoming more and more attuned to asking people, even at the beginning of a session, what's your expectation for this session? Because I think that it could provide a nice mindful moment going in, like, what are you wanting to get out of this? And make even that as a positive intervention to show, you know, what we expect is really what we experience. So let's just talk about that. Let's put that on the table.
And other things you asked them in the beginning or the end of the session?
Like I said earlier, what's good, what's been going well lately, and at the end, it's always what do you need accountability around.
Right. And what do you think makes it work? Like when people progress, what could be the mechanisms?
I think a big part of the mechanism is helping people tap into what their beliefs are, what their thinking is, and to ask those questions like, is that really working for you these days to believe what you're believing, or maybe we can create some new patterns that end up getting us more of what we want.
So that's one of the things that seem to work.
Yeah, I think that's an essential ingredient.
What else? What other ingredients might be working? Or processes, or
clarity around vision. You know, what is it you're wanting? And infusing all sorts of positive words around that vision, so that to me is what getting pulled by the future is all about. And so that's a tool, I guess, that I use a lot, which is, you know, let's get clear about what it is that you're wanting in this situation. Let's do some writing around it. Let's build a vision board around it. Let's get you in the space of the realization of it before it's even here, like the Olympic athlete at the top of the luge, picturing his success at the end, knowing that he's ready for it, believing that he's going to win.
And what other things, Mike, when you facilitate people's learning processes, what else causes the learning or the development?
I mean, their heart, you know, their heart, their openness, their mindset, their belief, like I said.
Yeah. And what would you say if people ask you, so how's this different from other ways of working? Like, how is this positive psychology thing that you're doing different from other consultants or coaches or educators?
I don't know. You know, focusing on what's good. Taking our limited amount of attention and really honing it on what's positive, what we want, as opposed to perhaps what might be even more in our wiring, which is to focus on what's not good, the threat, or what we don't want. So I think that to me is the great value that positive psychology adds, is a shift in paradigm.
Right. And other things that you could say to other people that what you're doing is different?
I think that's it. I mean, to me, like, I could pull other things, but I think essentially it's that. It's a paradigm shift. It's a change in lens. It's a reframing of story. It's a look towards the future with a positive eye, and kicking it up a notch, like really just taking it to a new level and being intentional and attentional on evolution, and evolution with a positive spiral.
Right. And are there things that we've not talked about but that are important for me to understand to kind of get the full picture of what you're doing?
Well, in Cleveland, what we are doing is, like I said, that citywide intervention where a tipping point is going to occur in that city, and what the world is going to see is an underdog that made it back to the top because people in that physical environment, in that place, decided to shift their mindsets just in the ways that we've been talking. And it's starting to take root there. You know, I feel like the rumblings of the rooting, and we're really just building the bridge as we walk on it, as Robert Quinn says. And so there's a vision that there's going to be this great energy there, and there's this vision that there's going to be a booming economy again there. There's this vision that, you know, that the boards are going to come off the buildings, and that, you know, things are just going to rejuvenate and regenerate. But the operationalizing of that vision is a step at a time.
Right. And other things that you're doing that we haven't been talking about but that are important to kind of understand the way that you work, how you apply positive psychology?
I guess along the same lines of building the bridge is believing in the co-creation of it all, and of the strengths-based organization that it takes, the village that it takes to make this happen. And connecting people into this in such a way that their hearts are so aligned with this that they're just so in it that there's no way that they can't be in it, you know? And yeah, it's like, you know, all these individuals in a system taking on their own stuff, like looking inward as opposed to waiting or expecting this way, but looking inward and realizing that it is all an inside job, which is why I believe so much in learning and development, because it's a beautiful thing. It just creates so many, look at you, 2 master's degrees, now PhD, right? You're in it.
Yeah. I have curiosity and love learning. Characterizes me. What advice would you give to us, like if others are new to the field and would like to learn about positive psychology and coaching and what to do? What advice, based on your experience, could you give them?
Get a coach.
Get a coach.
Get a coach. Yeah, experience it. To me, that's what these learning labs are about. It's an experience of positive psychology. That's what any positive intervention is. It's an experience where you create a sense memory, and that sense memory creates a new level of vibe that you're putting forth, a new, you know, stuff that's really can't be measured yet today, but something that I know is an essential ingredient in it. So I would say my advice would be, kick it up in your own life.
Yeah.
If you want to help others do it, are you down with doing it yourself? And if not, then consider a new field. And
when you say experience, I'm thinking experiential learning and stuff like that. And that's a little different from many coaches. They just sit and talk. Like, what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, that's where like everyone comes in with different things. Like I just went with a client the other day. She came. She expected to come up to my office, and I met her outside, and I was like, "Come on, let's go." And we walked around the city together, and it was because she was having a hard time making decisions. Like, this is a pattern that And so I wanted her to follow her intuition in which way to turn down the street or which way to go on the block. And she came back with, that was the best session we ever had.
All right.
I mean, it was different. It was, I mean, we still chatted the way we would if we were in my office, except we were walking down the street, and every time we got to a corner, she had to decide which way was she being pulled, and to learn to trust that intuition.
That's really interesting. Other things that you would give as advice?
I'll just reiterate what I said earlier about needing to ask the right question versus realizing that there's a ton of great questions. That was such a big pivotal turning point in my practice, was coming to that understanding.
Yeah.
It was it was such an empowering insight. I was like, oh, right. Nice. So then it helped me get out of my own way and just be present, be loving.
And can you say something more about the presence and loving?
Yeah, I mean, just, instead of sitting there like, what am I going to ask next, I was able to really be there and connect and trust, really. That goes back to that intuition trust thing. I will ask what I need to ask when I need to ask it.
Right. So no plans.
No plans.
Right.